Well,
I think I'm gonna go ahead and get started because we do have 3 people that are going to speak to us today, and we want to make sure that we have time for question and answers. So just housekeeping, if you don't mind keeping your speakers on mute so that we don't hear your background noise unless you're sharing or asking a question, that would be great. And I do want to give a moment for just brief introductions, but like I said, we've got a few speakers with some really good information, so we want to make sure that we leave them enough time. So what I want to do is just kind of go down my list on the right. I'll just say your first name if you'll unmute and introduce yourself. Tell us what business that you're with and where you're from. And Kathy, you're first.
Kathy Sitker, Blaine Senior Center, on the board of directors for the chamber.
Thank you. Janae? I don't know if she can unmute. Kim? Michael Jones.
Michael Jones with the City of Blaine.
Yeah.
Alicia.
Hi, everybody. Alicia Rule, 3 roles. City of Blaine on the City Council, small business owner in Bellingham, Rule and Associates, and running for state representative.
Dan.
Dan Demand, Director of Community Assistance Program.
And Louise.
Publisher of the Northern Light newspaper, Blaine Chamber Director, and we are going to press in about an hour on the Northern Light this week. So I'm going to be going on and off screen. So I might just take myself off the video, but I'll be listening, and Molly will be listening as well the whole time.
Okay, thanks. David.
Hey everybody, David Geske, Redwood Investments, Raymond James, Certified Financial Planner.
Debbie. I think you're muted, Debbie.
yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
Sorry, I hit the wrong
No
button.
worries.
Debbie Shirk, Ruby Ribbon.
And Heidi.
It's Heidi Holmes with Blaine Birch Bay Park and Rec, and I'm also on the Blaine Board of Directors, Blaine Chamber Board of Directors.
Kristen.
Kristen Berry, Silver Reef Casino Resort.
And Liz. I think you might be muted, Liz. It's Liz from the Birch Bay Chamber, Liz Thornton. Michael Ebert.
Yep. Hi, everybody. Michael Ebert, Fortify Insurance.
President of the Blaine Chamber.
Oh, and President of Blaine Chamber. Yes, thank you. I forgot that key piece.
Molly.
Hey guys, I'm Molly with the Northern Light.
Serge.
I'm Serge Samolenko, Spoken Designs, and I'm also one of the directors of the Blaine Chamber.
Tim. Yeah, he might be away from his computer. It's Tim Woodard. He's with BP, and he's also on our board. And then Carol.
Carol Solomon with the Blaine Chamber. And I'm on the phone, so you can't see me.
Okay. And Danielle?
Danielle Gone with the Birch Bay Chamber of Commerce, and I've got kids, so I'll stay on mute the whole time.
Thanks, Danielle. And then we have Gina.
Hi, Gina Stark, Port of Bellingham, Regional Economic Partnership.
Thank you. And Ash, I think I called on you, did I? The names are jumping around a little.
You haven't. So I'm Ash with the SBDC. Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm Bonnie from the City of Blaine, Mayor and City Council, and former Blaine business owner.
Thank you, Bonnie. I'm sorry, my names are jumping around. I thought they were going to stay in alphabetical order, and they have not. Please bear with me. This is our first chamber meeting, and so my first time actually administering a meeting. So if I mess up, I'm sorry. If I've missed someone, please let me know.
Nobody important.
Richard, I see your name, but I didn't see you on my list. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I'm just I serve you all on the Blaine City Council, and I'm the one that normally is assigned to paying attention to the Blaine Chamber meetings.
Oh, awesome.
Okay.
Great to have you. Okay, so I think we'll just jump right in. Michael Jones is going to be speaking to us first about just some updates in Blaine, the economic development and recovery efforts, and then the new small business revolving loan program. So take it away, Michael. And thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Donna also asked if we could speak a little bit about the budget. So I'll start there and then mention some of the other items she brought up and turn it over to Bonnie, our Mayor Onyon, for a little bit of an update on our revolving loan program for small business assistance. The city budget, real quick overview. It's really made up of many facets, and in a lot of ways it's sort of like a conglomerate of affiliated organizations that don't share revenue and don't share expenses. I encourage folks who are more interested in looking at that information and getting some background to take a look at the city's website, cityofblaine.com. There's a section on budgets, and there's a little video that explains the budget overview, and then there's a budget in brief document that folks can take a look at if they want more detail. But I guess it's really obvious that COVID-19 was not part of our conversations when we were developing our budget for 2020 in the middle and end of last year. So things are very different now than we were forecasting. In the area of utilities, things like water, electric, sewer, those services that we provide, the budgets tend to be more stable because people generally turn on the electricity regardless of the circumstances. And people generally drink water and take showers regardless of the circumstances. But other funds, things that rely on economic activity, are very heavily affected. And the three primary ones are our lodging tax fund, our general fund, and our street fund. With the lodging tax, which is made up of, basically it's called hotel motel, and sometimes people in Blaine refer to it as BTAC because that's the Blaine Tourism Advisory Committee. It's a tax that's collected by lodging facilities, passed on to the city. We originally budgeted for $250,000 in revenue this year. We are now projecting that to be about $175,000, so about a 30% reduction in revenue. It's very possible that reduction could be greater than that, but that's what we're estimating at this point. As you can imagine, most of that comes from Semiyama Resort, so we stay pretty closely connected with them on getting information on what it looks like, how things will develop. We have cut expenses in relation to that drop in expected revenue. So we've cut $85,000 in expenses in areas of events, activities, and also the Plover ferry services for this summer. Most of those things could not happen anyway under the existing rules and regulations, and our partners like the Chamber of Commerce made decisions to not host events, and so we withdrew the grants that were given to them that would have helped with those events. So that's where most of that savings comes from. We will, if things pan out the way our projections look, we'll have about $80,000 at the end of the year in that fund, which will roll into next year and will be the seed money, if you will, for grants and events next year. And then, of course, we'll be collecting that lodging tax next year. And hopefully it'll be in a time when people are doing a lot more traveling and the resort's a lot busier, and things will be better than they are this year. Our general fund is what provides the majority of city services, other than utility related services, things like police, parks, public facilities, general administration, finance, planning and building, economic development, and courts are funded through the general fund, and to a certain extent streets, but that's a little bit of an exception. Our original projections for 2020 were that we would collect about $7.3 million in revenue in the general fund. And of course, our budget, as a balanced budget, can spend up to that amount. And because of the demand for services, the city council typically allocates all that we are projecting. So that's roughly how our budget was laid out: 7.3 million in revenue with about 7.3 million in expenses. Our current best case scenario for revenue is that we would collect about 6.5 million. So $800,000 reduction, about 11 or 12%. That's a pretty big hit in a budget that's already operating in a very lean format. So that reduction, just to give you an indication, it's coming from a wide variety of things. Property taxes, for example, some people may not pay them this year, so we won't receive that. But the biggest hit is for things like sales tax. Our sales tax is down 19% for the first quarter. We receive those receipts 2 months late because they go to the state first, so we're a couple months behind. But for January, February, and March, we're 19% down from our projections. But a better indicator is March on its own. March, which, if you remember, started out kind of normal and ended under quarantine, we are down 42% in our sales tax projections. So we expect April, May, June, and probably July to be worse than that. And that's a significant impact to the budget. So the border closure is the primary contributor to that. Honestly, the Stay Home, Stay Safe, or Stay Home, Stay Healthy program is a big contributor. But what we need is the border to reopen and for BC to allow folks to come back to BC without going into quarantine. It may be some time before that happens. We would not be surprised if our best case scenario of that $800,000 reduction is that things are worse than that when it all pans out. So we're obviously tracking that on a regular basis, and we'll be reporting to the city council monthly, which is what we're doing now. We recently did a budget amendment for general fund expenses, and we've reduced our general fund expenditures by about $120,000. So you may wonder, how does that work out that way? Well, first off, we were planning on 220 or 250 roughly in reductions, but when we were going through that analysis, we determined there were a couple of expenses that came up that were unavoidable and were unexpected. So those had to be added in, which caused our overall reduction to be smaller. But the main reason that we can reduce the expenses at a smaller amount than we can reduce our revenue is that we had a significant amount of money coming into the beginning of this year in what we would call excess operating revenue. So in other words, we had a lot of extra money in the bank, and not in the savings account, not in our reserves. We have about $1.3 million in reserves. This was money that was just available to us in our regular operating account. And we had about $1 million more than our fiscal policies require. That has turned out to be a godsend because that's giving us some cushion for 2020 and really helping us to maintain our level of service and hopefully not lay folks off, hopefully not stop programs before the end of this year. That's been really nice. Speaking of layoffs, it's a difficult topic and it's not an easy one to consider, but it is probably a reality that we'll have to look at later this year or maybe in 2020. Currently, city employees are going through a furlough program where all city employees that are in Teamsters, in the IAM union, or are in our electric crew, or are non-represented folks like myself are taking 1 week furloughs this year. That in total saves us about $65,000. Some folks are taking more than 1 week because they have the ability to do that and they're allowed to do that. That's one of our cost-saving programs. I mentioned the street fund is a little bit different than others because it has some designated revenue. It's funded in part by the general fund, but it is funded heavily by what is called the penny per gallon gas tax. Border communities are allowed to tax gas at 1 cent per gallon sold in the city. So we We are down about 60% in March. Again, March using it as an indicator month where we started out pretty normal and we ended up under isolation. The penny per gallon gas tax is off by 60%. So again, we expect April, May, June, July to be very bad in that area. So our street fund is pretty heavily hit. We will be looking at ways to reduce expenses there, and we've already done some of that, but we're watching that carefully. Sales tax also helps to fund the street fund a little bit because the citizens voted a couple years ago for a transportation benefit district. And as I mentioned, sales tax is down 19% for the first quarter and 42% for the month of March. So we're again watching that carefully. We do expect to be looking at potential reductions. And what's I think really important in all of this information is for people to bear in mind that government really is a customer service business. We use people and supplies to provide services to our constituents, to our customers, and I expect that we'll have no choice but to cut expenses further this year and potentially into next. And that will mean cutting personnel expenses, and that will likely result in layoffs, which in turn will reduce our level of service, reduce the level of service we're able to provide. The most visible effect will be that things take longer or go slower. For example, if fewer people are available to plow roads and less money is available to pay overtime for that, roads will get less attention during a snowstorm, and then it will take longer to clear them after the storm. We won't stop plowing. It won't just be a complete shutdown, but it will take longer. Things will move a little slower. And that's pretty indicative of a lot of different services. When people ask for customer service, it may take longer for someone to get to it because we simply don't have the resources to do it. That's one of the challenges with what we're doing. So moving on to economic development, I do want to let you know that we're working with all the cities and the county on some programs that are very much in their sort of infancy to help people and businesses. It's unclear how much money will be available and what programs there will be, but we are working to help ensure that the $16 million of CARES Act funding that came into Whatcom County, designated to the county and all the various cities, will be spent locally. And by saying what I mean by that is if we don't spend it all, it just gets kept by the state and they'll use it for statewide programs. So we're working together with the other organizations in Whatcom County to do our very best to make sure all of that is spent at a county level. Locally, we're looking at a couple of programs. One is around the distribution of personal protective equipment, or PPE, to businesses, and been chatting with Donna about that. We'll continue that conversation, and potentially the city will be helping the chamber distribute things like masks to businesses. Another one is where we're looking at possibly doing some street closures or partial street closures to allow dining to expand out onto some of our streets to help restaurants have more outdoor dining space. We have Alex Wenger in our economic development area working with those restaurants to find out if they have an interest. And then we're also working with WashDOT because the street that we would use is a state highway, Peace Portal Drive, and it's very regulated by the state. We may or may not be able to expand dining into the parking strip, but we're looking at that. We're also getting the Blaine by the Sea website up and running, as Serge is well aware, and we're hoping to have that fully functional and ready to help attract people to the great city of Blaine when they're able to travel a bit more. One of the best things that we've done, I think, though, is our small business revolving loan program that I would ask Mayor Onyon to speak about for a few minutes, and then I can give you a couple of updates on some of our COVID-related items. Thanks.
There we go. My speaker's on now. This will be really quick. Our RED, or RED, Revolving Loan Program, that's the Rural Economic Development Revolving Loan Program, which we have because of a, this program began in 1999, actually, and then was discontinued when the city lost its lending partner in 2011. So we didn't have any activity since 2011 until now. And then the city, by resolution, decided to activate this again because of the current crisis. And the funding for this comes from the Washington State Utility Tax Credit. Because we have our own electric utility, we're eligible for this program. So we have currently $100,000 in that program available, which has been sitting in that fund for quite a few years now. So as of Tuesday, we opened this program a couple weeks ago to the business community to make an application if they wanted to borrow $5,000 or $10,000, or the 2 increments, and it's available in 1, 2, and 3-year loan terms. The 1 year is 0 interest, the 2 years 1%, and the 3 years 2% interest. So it's a good value for the money, and there is a 6-month grace period with having to pay it back, but it's still due and payable within that loan term. And as of this Tuesday, we had received 3 applications. So this could be because either people don't feel the need for a loan right now, or we've also been hearing businesses don't really want to take on any debt, which is certainly understandable. But we're hoping that if there's still people out there that feel they could use these relatively small amounts of money, but might get them over this crisis, we're hoping they will go ahead and apply. All the details are on the city's website, and the deadline for applications is June 3rd, which is, is that today or tomorrow?
Today.
Today, yes. So at 5 o'clock is the deadline. And contact Alex Wenger if you have any questions about that. And again, the website has the most information on it. So thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. And obviously, we will extend that deadline if there are still more funds available than we've allocated. So that was sort of the first round, so we could review a batch of applications.
And we're going to open this window up again in January, next January. We expect to open up the window and receive more applications. So.
Great. So at the start of this, there was some chatting about the fact that the county had applied today for phase 2 under the new and revised state guidelines for a county by county reopening. So hopefully we'll be in phase 2 in a couple of days. I would say one thing that's really important for everybody to remember and to help communicate through their businesses and through their friends and family is that doesn't mean that everything's okay. That means that we actually probably need to be more diligent than we have been, because we need to maintain those low levels of infection, the low levels of hospital usage and those kinds of things by continuing to do things like wear masks and wash our hands and limit our exposure. But thankfully, we can now go out and do more stuff, and there can be more business activity. The city is, as you can tell, I'm in my office. The city is open and we are here and we are working, but we're a phase 3 group for regular operations. So we're still working remotely. People can get virtually all services here, apply for building permits and things like that, but it's all done remotely. When we get to the phase 3 opening, which we're thinking will probably be the end of this month or middle of July, we will be reopening in sort of a phased approach. So you can expect to see us face-to-face again around then, with 1 or 2 really key exceptions, actually. Courts are regulated by the Supreme Court of Washington rather than the governor due to the separation of powers. So court will be resuming in Blaine on June 10th. That will be our first face-to-face meeting kind of situation. And the city council and all of our committees and boards and commissions will be allowed to begin face-to-face meetings on the 17th of June. That's when the Open Public Meetings Act exception expires. So our first city council meeting that we expect to be face-to-face in the council chambers will be on June 22nd, with a revised seating arrangement and a reduced capacity for audience members, at least until we can have less physical distancing allowed, which probably is going to be a long time from now. and things like Planning Commission and Blaine Tourism Advisory Committee and all of those other kinds of advisory groups that the city has will be able to follow suit and also go to a more regular meeting format after June 17th. I think that's all we have for city updates. I know that used up a lot of time, but I hope it was helpful.
Thank you very much, Mayor Onyon and Michael Jones. We really appreciate all the information and the updates. On the same front of phase 2, we're going to go to Gina Stark. She is an economic development specialist with the Port of Bellingham, and she is going to talk about important items that each business needs to consider and identify resources that you'll need to be sure you have in place to open in a safe manner. Gina?
Hi, thank you, Donna. And Michael and Mayor Onyon, thank you for that update. That was just really informative. And I'm going to kind of piggyback on a bit of what Michael just said in terms of phase 2. So for those of you who don't know the work, you're like, Port of Bellingham, what do you guys have to do with Blaine? Well, we are actually funded by the city of Bellingham and the county and the port. So we do economic development for the whole entire county. So it's not just port business. In fact, sometimes I think the port specific is probably on the lower end of what I do. I do a lot of work with businesses and entities throughout the county. So, you know, one of the couple things that I want to talk about. So the first is in terms of, you know, this phase 2 opening. And as Mayor said, that, you know, we can expect that probably by Friday, we will be into phase 2. Well, what does that mean? Well, for businesses, it doesn't mean that you just flip on the lights and open the doors. And that's not, there needs to be some prep work. So essentially, you know, first thing I would always say is look at the governor's guidelines, because what we as an economic development are just like, well, what are you guys doing? What plan are you putting in place? We don't need to put a plan in place because there are those, the Department of Health, the governor's office, all these business entities have already created these guidelines. So we don't need to invent the wheel. What we need to do is to make sure you guys have the information and the tools in your toolbox to open up in a safe and effective manner. So, you know, one of the first things is to, you know, look at the business sector and what are the guidelines put forth by the governor's office. And if you don't know where to find those, you know, I'm always happy to share those. Our website, the economic development website, we try and post those so they're easy to find and to be accessible. So one of the first things that you need to do is put a plan in place for your business. How are you going to open? What are the ways that you are keeping your employees safe and you're keeping your customers safe? Because one of the main guidelines is that you have to have that, but you also have to have it readily accessible. So if for some reason somebody from the L&I comes in, you can say, hey, look, these are the policies we have in place and this is what we are doing. What it also does is it does also set a clear expectation to your customers. A lot of times people are like, well, what if we, because as of June 8th, as a business, your employees are required to wear a face mask. Well, what happens if a customer comes in and they don't have a face mask? You know, as a business, that's a tough decision for you to make. How do you approach them? You know, one of the best ways is to have those clear expectations. You know, you can kind of think of it like if you're a restaurant and you have that sign, the expectation is please wait to be seated. So expectation, you know, please be sure to have your face mask in place while you're waiting. So really setting those clear expectations is really important as you continue. Know where your resources are. You know, always check with the Department of Health if you have questions, check with L&I if you have questions, check with us, check with your SBDC. They are really knowledgeable. And then, you know, check also sometimes with your locals. You know, in Blaine, you've got a great resource with Michael Jones. You know, call them and ask them questions. Sorry, Michael, if I just added extra load, but, you know, and your chambers are also a great resource. So we're very fortunate in Whatcom County that we have a lot of resources at your disposal. And if one of us doesn't have a question, we're happy to refer you to who does or to get that answer for you. So that, I think that's really important. And the other thing to think about is because none of us want to go backwards, right? So on that front, there's two things. One is work with your local business, set that expectation and that norm of that we as businesses are going to open in a safe and secure manner. And that if you guys all have that united front, you know, and you have that one straggler business who maybe is not following the rules, they're going to be the odd man out and the outlier. And people shop and visit businesses with their feet. And if they see somebody who isn't doing a safe manner of business, they'll go down the street to somebody who is. And as you as a community, if you set that expectation, then that will be followed and that becomes the norm, right? Wearing the mask becomes the norm. And then, you know, the last piece is, you know, nobody wants to go backwards, but we can't predict what's going to happen, right? So it's really important, as we're so excited about phase 2 and look forward to phase 3. Just like, think of it as insurance, right? We may hope to never use insurance, but we have it, right? So think about if for some reason we do have to go backwards, that you have that in your pocket. You have that in your toolbox of this is what we need to do to kind of scale things back. And so you just have it, because that's the important thing, is having as many tools in our toolbox to do business. So that's kind of my overall, you know, spiel in terms of, you know, phase 2. And again, for us, we work really, really closely with all of our partners, the SBDC, the chambers. We work with all the mayors for all of the cities, as well as the county council, just so that we are all on the same page. I also work with our state and federal legislators to try and get as much information for you guys. But then the other thing, like I said, you guys are so fortunate to have, you know, Michael and Mayor Onyon. They're just right there in the community. But if there are other messages and things that you guys are seeing and experiencing, let us know so I can share that information, because we're only as strong as the information that we share. And that helps me too to try and get us more resources, like Michael mentioned about the CARES Act dollars, how best to use them so that it really helps our communities and our businesses. So that's a quick overview of phase 2 and what my advice. Yeah. So
thank you, Gina. Very, very good information. And we just heard your dog, I think, right at the end.
Yeah, right at the end. They held out as long as they could. So
great. Our last speaker today is Asche Rider. She's the Associate Director of the Small Business Development Center and a regular in our meeting. So we're really excited to have her share with us today. I'll just let you take it away since you kind of have what you want to say.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. And then thank you to Michael Jones and Mayor Onyon and Gina for the great information that they've shared. This has been really nice to kind of hear what the city is doing and then get great updates from the port as well. So my information is going to be a little bit general just because I'll be briefly talking about a little bit of the nuts and bolts that businesses might want to think about as they look at reopening. And it's going to be really specific to your business and to your industry. And so I sent Donna an email that has some resources in it that you can probably either drop her a line or you can ask me, and I'm happy to provide the information as well. So, you know, Gina made some great comments about making sure that you keep a workplace safe. So the L&I standard is basically that, I'm looking at notes, so I'm going to just pull them up so I don't have to look down quite as far. The L&I standard is that business owners provide a workplace free from recognized hazards. And so we actually just had a webinar yesterday with an L&I specialist, and he very clearly stated that COVID-19 is a recognized hazard. So some ways that you can approach doing this is looking at putting in policies about temperature checks for both staff and customers. And one of the things that he said there that I think is just super important for everyone to think about, and Gina referenced, is you need a written plan. And what he said is if you don't write it down, it didn't happen. So I worked for a company that worked with the USDA really closely, and they had the same rule. So if we were doing temperature checks, it was meat production. So if we were doing temperature checks on our processes, if we didn't write it down, they assumed that we never actually checked anything. So I'd encourage you to make sure that you set up documents so that you're able to say, yes, when the staff member came in at 8:57, their temperature was 97.2 degrees. So think about those things. You know, I'm sure folks have seen out in the community, there are social distancing cues set up. So if you've gone to a grocery store, there are often lines of tape saying, hey, this is what 6 feet is, please keep this distance. Think about getting plexiglass shields if you're able to do that, and then providing personal protective equipment as well. And hopefully business owners will be able to get a little bit of assistance with that. I was fortunate enough in that I was able to schedule a medical massage last week. And to my great surprise, I have a little prop here. I was handed a waiver as I walked into the building. And I was like, oh, that's very clever. This is exactly what businesses should be doing. So if you have some sort of business that you have people that employees that are going to be in super close contact with customers, you might also want to consider thinking about creating a waiver. In a space like that, it makes a lot of sense to me that someone would want customers to really acknowledge and say, yes, I understand that there's a risk associated with coming here, and I personally accept that responsibility. So that's something that businesses might want to think about as well. And then I always think it's really great to think about messaging. So how are you going to share the fact that you're keeping everyone safe? So think about sharing that with your employees, making sure expectations for them are really clear, and then also it really is for their safety. So it's not a top-down thing that doesn't really make sense to them, that they might think that you're being really severe. It's truly to keep them safe. And sharing that with customers is also really helpful as well. So one of the great things about L&I is that they have 2 separate branches. One is compliance, which tends to represent the worker. So that's if there's a violation, the compliance officers come in. And then the other one is consultation. And so the consultation side actually represents the employer. And you can request a free consultation. So there's no cost to do it. They don't provide any sort of reprimands or fines if you do request a consultation. So this is a really valuable service. Right now, it sounds like you're able to get in or at least speak to someone within a couple of days. You can either do a brief phone call if you have some really quick questions, or they're also able to actually come out to your site and assess your site. So in addition to talking about any risks associated with COVID-19, they can also do an assessment of just your general workplace. So this is something that's really valuable to do. I'd encourage anyone who is interested in setting it up to, at the very least, call and talk to them, just because this is a way you can help keep everyone a lot more safe, working with the experts that it's their job to make sure that workplaces are safe. So I think that concludes what I have prepared. I can offer to try and answer questions if people have them, but again, I would say that this is really specific. So it could be that I might need to look into it and get back to you as well. And then I just also want to remind everyone that at the SBDC, we're available for no cost business consultation. So this is about everything business related. If it's anything that's super safety specific, then again, I'd kind of point you to L&I. But we can talk about just sort of general business operations, strategy, and take a look at financials and talk about any issues that you might be facing with COVID.
Thank you, Ash. A couple other things. I just put all of the links that she sent me this morning into the chat screen. I don't mind sending them via email, but they're all right there if you guys want to access them right now. And then also on the face mask directive, the chambers will be assisting as soon as next week if some of you are going to be starting back with your businesses. We have an all-chamber meeting on Fridays, and I'll be picking them up on Friday. And so as soon as Monday, I should be able to start helping with that. But again, we're all working together and trying to come up with a way that we can be unified in the way that we're getting them out. Liz, did you have something?
I was going to say same here. We'll have them at the Birch Bay Chamber too.
Okay, thank you. So at this time, I just want to open it up for questions. If anybody wants to ask either Michael or Mayor Bonnie or Ash or Gina anything specifically.
Do you guys know, so I will follow all of these directives, but the one thing that keeps coming to mind is with temperature checks, is anybody talking about HIPAA? Should I not worry about that? That feels off to me.
I can jump in on this one. So this was a question that came up yesterday in the webinar that we put on, and there are a lot of great questions around HIPAA with that, and there are not many answers at this time. So what we're seeing a lot with business regulation is that there are a lot of questions that come up because the regulation is moving so fast, and then people have to kind of take a step back and come and answer it. So at this point, I don't think that there's anything specific in terms of, yes, you can do this, and no, you can't do that. It sounds like taking temperatures is the way to go, at least with the current guidance that we have.
Thank you.
And I'd just be really careful about who you share it with.
What a crazy situation. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a quick question for Gina. Can you guys hear me? Yep,
Yes.
Okay. Gina, do you have any information on the State Department of Commerce's emergency grants up to $10,000?
I do. So the Department of Commerce, sorry, I just got a notification about another grant. I was like, oh, so the Department of Commerce did finalize the list of, actually, I should take that back. It really wasn't the Department of Commerce. It was actually the governor's office who made the final determination of which businesses would receive grants up to $10,000 in our community. And I was just sent that list, so I'm in the process of notifying the businesses who received them, and also in the process of notifying those who did not receive them. So I am a one-person department on this, so I do ask, bear with me. I am really working on getting back to each person personally. You know, if you applied, then the important thing is that this is for operational costs, rent, utilities, marketing, supplies. And, you know, the other thing in terms of this grant is that it was not a lot of money for a lot of businesses. We had over our whole Whatcom County over 700 applications, and all of them were qualified and worthy to receive these fundings. So really working with our cities and our counties to try and develop another grant program to really continue to address this overwhelming need, as well as working with federal delegations to try and get that HEROES Act passed, which will have also additional business assistance. So, did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you very much again, Gina, Ash, Mayor Onyon. I want to call you Bonnie. We're Facebook friends, and so I just immediately want to call you Bonnie. I can't help it. Mayor Onyon and Michael
Bonnie's
Jones.
okay too.
Okay. Thank you so much for attending today and offering all of this wonderful information and these resources.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure.
You are so welcome. And again, please feel free to contact me, phone, email, smoke signal. Always happy to answer your questions.
Will do. Thank you.
Good to see you all.
I miss all
Yes,
your
definitely.
faces. Good to see you in real life soon.
Donna, is somebody going to have the links for everything that was talked about today?
Yes, I have them, and I've also recorded this for those that weren't able to attend. So I'll send all of it out or post it on our Facebook page and website.
Okay.